Going once, going twice, sold! You're listening to The Property Pod, an accessible and easy way to get into or help understand the goings-on of the property market. Join Aaron, John and Pat as they discuss all things real estate, most likely get sidetracked, and then try and rein it all back in as they present The Property Pod.
I'm not driving.
Do you want me to start it off?
Yeah, you do it.
All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to The Property Pod. Here we have with our three favorite real estate agents, Aaron Horn, Patrick Berry, and John McGregor. Gentlemen, how are you this morning?
Feeling pretty good, J-Max. Loving the intro today.
Yeah, wowzers, trousers. I'm not an agent, by the way.
Yeah, well, you are today.
You reckon?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, sweet. I'll take that.
Let's roll with that.
He's bought a house once. He's upgraded.
Yeah. No, you're our resident expert, mate. It is what it is.
Well, far from expert, and actually what I wanted to talk about today was when I bought my house, if I didn't have you guys on deck, I would have been in a whole world of pain.
Yeah, the offer process.
Yeah, so I thought today would be a good day to get into that.
Straight off the thought, you're exactly right. Most people, and I might have said this before, will spend more time researching their television than they do actually understanding the process of purchasing a home.
I think it's a really simple. We can rack this show up in about 20 seconds.
Yep.
Sign here. Thank you. Done.
No, that'll do
Mate,
it.
we don't all wear fur coats and goblets and just toss our money around. I'll just sign this bit of paper and sign that bit of paper.
But a book I really do enjoy actually was The Yes Man by Danny Wallace, and
Is that the Jim Carrey movie?
That's the adaptation, yeah. But the actual movie itself had no elements to
it's just a jumping off point.
Yeah, but legitimately, if you read that book, he was required for the first element. Any time that someone had asked him a question, he had to say yes. And he did
it for like a year or something,
didn't he? He did it for a year, yep. And but before, he had to end up having to have some rules. But for the first part, it was yes. It was yes. Every time he was asked a question.
What was one of the kind of more outlandish things he had to say yes to? Can you remember?
God, it was years ago since I read that book. I think one of them that changed his life the most was it was an invitation to go to Spain.
Someone just said, "Do you want to come to Spain with me?"
Yep, and away went.
And then, so how did it work for finances and stuff like that? Like he just had to make it work.
He just had to make it work. He was a writer and journalist, I think it was, and apparently he just racked up a lot of credit card debt, effectively.
Yep.
So it didn't. I can't remember how much it went into that, but I do remember in the book he just racked up a lot of debt. Because he was donating here. He was every time someone bumped into him in the street, would you like to donate to this cause? He's like, yes.
I got you.
Send that off. Yeah.
So then the sequel was called The Debt Man?
The Debt Man. Either way, if you're a yes man in purchasing property, let's just say you're going to get into some trouble.
And you're my favourite friend.
I know, Pat sounded like a yes man there. He's been out of the game off with his BMX stuff, so he must be chomping at the bit to get some sales.
So I'm just joking around when I say just sign here, John. Obviously, there is a lot more to it than just signing a bit of paper and looking at a house. Sure, if you want to do it, that's great, but you probably should know a little bit more about what you're getting into.
Yeah.
So I think we should really have a deep dive and look at what's actually involved in the process of it. What do you reckon?
Yeah. This would be fun.
All right. Let's cut to a break and get into it.
Yeah.
As a family-run business, First National Real Estate McGregor understands that the property market can be stressful. However, with a strong team in both sales and rentals, we are here to guide you through the property maze. Find out more today at mcgregorfm.com.
Cool, boys. All right. Let's do it. I want to know more about making an offer and getting a contract signed and what all this stuff means. I know if I didn't have, I said it before, if I didn't have you guys on deck and trusted you the way I do, I would have been up a creek without a paddle.
Yeah, yep.
So essentially, if we were just to go at it, what is the process of buying a home in Tassie? And then how does it differ on the mainland? Like, is the process of me buying there different to here?
One of the things I'm going to preface for us is, again, that the whole thing that we always push in the show is to have a good team built around you. One of the very simple things that people don't consider is, who am I going to be approaching after I've purchased a home? So it's really common now that people have probably sought their bank or their financial lender about asking, look, how much can I even borrow? But some people might not even do that first. But another person they don't realise they should need to consider is actually having their team of their solicitor or conveyancer in that instance to help them walk through what extra clauses they might need on a contract and review it, and also to even their building inspector, as it's been mentioned before, their finance broker. So before you really start pulling the pin on purchasing a property, you really want to get that team lined up first. And in your case, Aaron, I mean, you had good friends that could help you coach you through that as well. So even building a relationship with a real estate agent that you trust might not necessarily be the first agent or the final agent that you purchase the home through. Bless you, Patrick. But I mean, because the reason why I say that is, before we get into the meat of it, is many times I've had first home buyers especially come to me, and this might be that they've missed out on 2 other properties, and then we've sat them down and said, okay, so are you familiar with the standard conditions and what all these clauses mean? And they said, oh, we've never read it. What? I mean, I'm just sort of gobsmacked. So then it's like, right, before we even begin this process, I'm going to ensure that you guys are all very, very comfortable exactly what you're signing before we continue down this offer process.
It's interesting you said that as well, because I had a property last night. I was working with some purchasers, and I think this is the 5th property they were trying to buy, and everyone they'd missed out on, John. And I said, rightio, we need to have a look at what you've been putting in. Well, we've been writing the contracts up ourselves. Our solicitor helped us write the first one, and we haven't had any luck ever since. Yeah, there was one simple clause on the solicitor's contract that they prepared that was a no-go for any vendor to sign, because they were competing against other people, so it was just throwing them out. We just slightly worded it so it still allowed them to do what they wanted to do, but gave the vendor a little bit of protection as well. And I think they'll have a lot better chance now of actually securing a property. So it's like, obviously it's important to get solicitors to look over contracts, but it's also important to understand that sometimes there needs to be a bit of give and take as well with a contract. It just can't be all one way or another.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, but like you said, there's so many people that don't actually know what they're signing. A lot of agents will just get them to.
I wonder if that's
sign here.
I wonder if that's something that's come from, like the old when you'd get iTunes on your computer and it would come up with all the terms and conditions, and you just always agree to it.
Click.
And there's like that South Park episode where is it Butters or one of them or Kyle doesn't read the terms and conditions and ends up getting turned into a human centipede.
That's right.
But essentially, like, everybody jokes in South Park that they've read, like, every time you update your iTunes, you read through the whole entire thing, and it's just this ridiculous thing. And every time every person agrees to it, like, Apple could get in there and just be like, we now own your soul.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Well, and they probably do.
So, but like, I'm so used to doing that. I'm like, oh, yep, new terms and conditions, click, I agree to all of this.
Yeah.
I guess it could be the same with buying a property, just like, oh, yep, they know what they're doing. Sign on the dotted line as Pat tells us to.
Well, I think, why don't we say we're going to assume at this point that you've been looking on the market for quite some time and you're ready to, like, okay, what do I do to make an offer now?
Yeah, let's pretend you've never made an offer, you don't know what's involved. How do you do it?
Yeah. So the first one is obviously what actually constitutes an offer. So, for example, let's just say you offer for $500,000. Well, that's actually not enough information. Because what we're going to need next is, okay, what does that $500,000 look like? Have you got $500,000 in your bank account that you can just transfer 30 days after, an offer and acceptance? Or is that $500,000 subject to a building inspection? Is it subject to finance? Is it subject to, approvals of any magnitude? So what you're looking at then is you've got an offer price of $500,000. What conditions are associated with that, including your deposit? So is that 5%, 10%, $1,000? What are the conditions preceding that? So a conditions precedent is, for example, finance or a building inspection. And then finally, what's the time frame of your settlement? So is that 30 days upon confirmation of your finance, or is it a 60-day clause? Is it a 120-day clause? So you've got all these elements of your offer that the price isn't the sole determinant of whether or not that offer is going to be accepted.
But where does all that stuff come from? Like, why does it change 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? Like, what's the reason?
What's the reason for all that? I suppose the best way to consider it is what's the minimum amount of time that's going to take for those clauses to be satisfied. So you couldn't it'd be hard to have a 1-day building inspection clause, for example, because that's not going to give enough time for it to have a professional come and look at the property, assess it, do a report, for you to review the report, and then make a decision accordingly.
But I'm probably jumping all over the place here, but I know I was talking to some people on the weekend in Bendigo.
Yep.
They have to get their building inspection done prior to like an auction or whatever like that.
Oh, okay.
So it's Different states have different ways of doing things.
Yes, and I guess that's where the question before was.
Yeah. So,
heading.
obviously, in states like Victoria, for instance, everyone knows that they're very auction heavy and they do a lot of auctions as their form of sale.
Yep.
With an auction, you need to be a fully what we call an unconditional contract, so no clauses at all. Basically, got that $500,000 ready to hand over in 30 days' time.
So everything that John just said
Is all
essentially
done.
off the table
Yep.
and all done.
Now, in Tasmania, we tend to use for sale by offer, where we put it out to the market and let people tell us what they're prepared to pay for a property. And we have the difference where we have conditional offers and unconditional offers. So John's talking about conditional offers, which have strings attached to them.
Yep.
So things that need to be met within timeframes for the deal to go ahead. What your friends were describing in the mainland is what we call an unconditional offer. So they're being told by their agent, you need to go have finance 110% done. You need to have your building all fully finished before you can proceed forward.
Yep.
And so it's just different states have slightly different ways of doing it. I guess in Tassie we must be a little bit more relaxed and we're prepared to give people the time to organise.
Well, it comes down to if you're purchasing under auction conditions versus private treaty situation. So
I remember you talking about private treaty way back when.
In the sense of an auction, and this is actually, here's an interesting difference that happens Tasmania versus in Victoria, Sydney under auction. Under an auction circumstance, a contract and its terms are going to be actually drawn up prior to the property even becoming available for sale, generally speaking, because the contract has to be available to be seen by the purchasers at least between 7 to 14 days prior to the auction proceeding. I know those dates aren't right, so forgive me, but it has to be generally at least 7 days before the contract's got to be available to see. Under buying under auction terms is that it's going to be fundamentally a cash contract with a 10% deposit, no conditions applied. So it's just you are buying it, bam, away you go. So that's why they say you've got to do all your research prior to you making an offer.
Yep.
Because you can't have it subject to a building inspection. You can't have it subject to finance. When you put up your hand and you're successful on the day or beforehand or after, that's it. Away you go. Like that house is yours and you're committed to it after the deposit's paid. In Tasmania, for example, though, because we've got 99% private treaty, most offers are going to be purchased under a conditional arrangement. It's very rare that someone's got that money available and they'll be signing a contract with no conditions whatsoever. And so that's why then the contracts aren't generally drafted beforehand. In Tasmania, they'll end up getting drafted by the real estate agent as opposed to the solicitor. One of the interesting things about Tasmania is where in most of Australia, the contracts are actually legislated by Parliament. In Tasmania, they've actually been drawn up by both in conjunction with the Real Estate Institute of Tasmania and the Law Society. So with that, on a contract, if you're asked to see it beforehand, you'll see two big badges, the REIT and the Law Society. This is vitally important that if you are about to make an offer on a property, you ask to see the contract and you see those two images on the top because it's a copyrighted contract that is been drawn up in conjunction with the Act. And so therefore you are signing a contract in confidence or making an offer on a property in confidence that all the terms are legal, relevant and appropriate to Tasmania.
So it's not like just a napkin someone's written, I'm going to buy your house for $500,000.
That's exactly right.
It's the real deal.
Yeah. So then I suppose the next one is, we're looking at how do we actually do it. I know we got sidetracked a bit, but probably the best thing to ask, if you were someone who's going to ask, Pat, how would you submit an offer? What would you say?
I normally say to people that, me personally, I like to do it here in our office as opposed to at the property. I like to get people in and we type it up together and go through it all and make sure we've got everything done correctly. Mainly because my handwriting's terrible, so I've got to work with what I got.
And you can't spell.
And I can't spell, so I need the computer to be able to spell check for me. But moving past those two issues.
But buy with him, guys. We promise he's a really good agent.
Yeah. He just can't write well.
He can somewhat talk. He's good.
I have noticed you talk to your watch a lot more to send messages and stuff now.
Yeah, because it's easier.
Siri gets it right.
All right, we've given him shit. Let's move on.
We missed you last week, Pat.
I normally invite people in the office, tell them it takes about 20 to 30 minutes to draw up the contract. The reality is it's more about sort of 40 minutes by the time we go through all components of it. After we've sort of gone through each stage, answered the questions, filled out the paperwork, we print it out and we go through it together step by step and do what you spoke about, talk about the standard conditions of sale, explain them, talk to them about what that actually means.
Yeah.
The reason I say sort of 20 to 30 minutes up to sort of 40 minutes is because one of the first things I do is I try to get an understanding of has my purchaser been through this 4 or 5 times already in the last week?
Yep.
If they have, they probably already know the paperwork pretty well.
Zip it through,
and they're happy just to sign. And they don't want me explaining every finer little detail. And they're sitting there bored thinking, what the hell is he doing? We know all this.
Yeah.
However, if it's a new buyer that hasn't seen a contract in, a few years, it does take a good 30 to 40 minutes to get through it because we want to explain every element of it and make sure they fully understand it before they commit to signing it.
Yeah, yeah.
The other thing I always like to stress to a purchaser is, like you said, with the contract, making sure it's got the 2 logos at the top, is also that at the point the purchaser signs the paperwork, it is just an offer. It is not a contract. It's an offer because it's on their terms. So everything that's outlined in the paperwork from start to finish is all what they are happy with.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to check as well, because it's make this offer and then am I legally binded to that?
At the point that you sign it, it's an offer. If the owner within, say, we go and take it to the owner and they say, yes, we're happy with absolutely everything on there, and they sign off on it, it changes from an offer to a legally binding contract.
Okay, yep.
So if the owner comes back and makes one small change on it, they might change it from 21 days finance to 19-day finance, just something really minute and silly.
Just to negotiate.
Yeah. You then have the decision if you want to accept that change or reject it, and you're not committed to go any further from that point forward. So the moment the owner crosses something out, changes something, and initials that change to take
hits
back
the
to
reset
you,
button.
it resets it, and you have the decision then whether or not you go forward. The other thing I really like to stress to purchasers as well is that when they sign a contract, they can pull out of the contract at any stage up until the point that we've told them that's been accepted. So the other thing a purchaser needs to understand is that a contract is not accepted until the agent has actually called them and let them know that it is all finalised and accepted. So say hypothetically an agent gets a contract signed at 6 o'clock on Saturday night, but they're too lazy to call the purchaser to let them know. We're sitting on the couch, the purchaser is at 10:30 on Saturday night and thinking, shit, we've done a terrible thing, we shouldn't have done this. And they send an email through to the agent, say, hey guys, just wanted to let you know, we need to get out of this, we've made a terrible mistake. Because the offer and acceptance hasn't happened in the form that they've been notified that it's been signed off on, they have the right to pull out of it, is my understanding. Is that correct, John?
Potentially. I think...
I'm the understanding that you've got to have full offer and acceptance, which is relayed back to the purchase to inform them that their offer has been accepted.
Yeah, to me, that'd just be fair. And in the event that...
What about like a voicemail or something? Say you called, left a voicemail, I haven't checked it.
Voicemail is timestamped, so you could argue that there is a voicemail there at times, so I think...
And although I think the biggest thing that part of the contract, actually this is probably a good way to mention, is that in the event that a purchaser is very, very unsure about committing to this, there is the option for the clause known as a cooling off period.
I really like this. I use this a lot with my first home buyers especially.
Yeah. And where that came into play, it's only a very recent history that it's been in Tasmania, because that's one thing that's quite unique about the Tasmanian contract is everything can be, is negotiable in that sense. Let's use a contract in Victoria, it's legislated that you have to have a cooling off period. But in Tassie, you can choose to nominate to have it or not. Now, what a cooling off period is I like to think of it as I've changed my mind clause. So for any instance, like you've made an offer, it's been accepted by the owner, signed off, dated, but for the next 3 days you can sit on it and go, I changed my mind, and you can withdraw without any consequence.
Now, what I really like about this clause is if, say, you're at an open home on Saturday, you love a place to death, you want to buy it, but you're a little bit concerned about it because you haven't checked with your solicitor that that everything's in there correctly. You could effectively, I tell my purchasers, add the cooling off clause. Let's get the deal done. Let's secure the property for you. And you can go on Monday and check with your solicitor that you're happy with everything. And you've got the ability to cancel the contract if you've made a terrible mistake or I've led you astray with incorrect information and it's not what you thought it was. It gives you that ability to ensure you don't miss out, but also the ability to double check that everything's correct. So I tend to use it quite a lot as a way to make people feel less stressed because they've got that ability to seek further advice.
That would chill me out a bit if I felt kind of pressured to be like, I don't want to miss out on this great place, but I don't know if all my eggs are in a line.
Now, a lot of agents out there don't like it. They will try to push pretty hard to get you to remove it out of a contract. The way I see it is that if you want to buy the property, you'll buy the property. You're going to go ahead if you want it. And that's 3 days. It's not going to kill an agent to wait 3 days to know if you're definite 100% or not.
No, exactly right.
414 Real Estate has been operating within the northern suburbs of Hobart since 2006. With their innovative approach to marketing and managing your property, they have all your property needs covered. Find out more by visiting them today at 414.com.au.
things though, I know we're jumping around a bit, but remember that example you mentioned before about the purchasers that had obviously a very sticky clause that they weren't getting on, they weren't getting accepted after 5 contracts or something.
Mm-hmm.
What is important to understand is I'll use the terms a strength of offer. Okay, so if someone says, but I offered them $500,000, they accept $490, why was that the case? It's like, well, the $490,000 contract meant that there was no conditions and the money was in their account 30 days from now, whereas your $500,000 offer was subject to TARS, subject to finance, subject to searches, subject to cooling off, subject. So it's
I didn't understand this before I worked in the office here with Pat, but I was just thought if you've got the most money or you offer the most money, you win.
That's right.
But then,
you don't. And look, these people that I was describing earlier, John, their clause was so simple. So they wanted a search clause put into the contract, which allowed them to check with the council that everything was approved at the property. Mm-hmm. The way the solicitor had worded it was that if anything was not approved, the vendor was required to fix it prior to settlement at their cost.
Yeah, no.
Now, I argued that the reason they may not be winning these properties is that the vendor may not want to fix these items and they should have the right to cancel the contract so if they didn't want to fix it. So we just slightly changed it that allowed them to do their searches, allowed them to find out if anything was wrong, and then we changed the clause to basically say that the vendor can choose to rectify the issues within a certain time frame, or if they don't, you can choose as the purchaser to cancel the contract or accept it in its current condition.
Yes.
So they still got their security to make sure everything was approved, but then there was options available for both the purchaser and vendor to proceed forward. So the vendor might say, that's a $500 fix to get that approved. I'll just go do it. Or it might be a $20,000 fix and the vendor's like, I'm just not physically in a position to do that. So that clause, just the way it was worded, was slightly, obviously it was very favourable to the purchaser, which is what a solicitor's there to do, is to look after their clients.
Absolutely.
However, they were actually damaging their client's position because of the way it was worded. They were just putting their client in an awkward position where when they're competing against another buyer, the agent's just like, nah, let's go with this. It's easier.
Yeah, exactly. It's just
so I think there's the right to have that clause was there, and they should be entitled to check those things. However, it was just needed some tweaking so that it was a little bit fairer for both parties.
Yes, yeah.
And that's what it is. Like, contracts are all about negotiation and finding a fair playing field for everyone involved. And by all means, go get a solicitor to check over and make sure it's all done the way you want it to do. But understand as well that sometimes those clauses may need to be slightly tweaked. To still have the same outcome, but just make sure it's fair for everybody.
Yes, and that's a good point, because it's always in a solicitor's best interest to be, obviously maximise their client's protection, which is what they should be doing. However, it's just as part of that negotiation process, just bear in mind is that the harder terms you might put on your offer, the less likely
you are to win a property.
And it's all part of doing that homework prior to. And I suppose the other thing about getting educated in that sense is if you know what you're offering, and that you can be a little bit more comfortable in tweaking the clauses to strengthen the term of your offer. Rather than having a 21-day building inspection clause, you might narrow it to 7 days. It's like, right, I want this to happen quickly. I know I'm asking a lot, but I'm going to make sure that everything's satisfied very, very quickly. That's subject to searches clause. I know it takes 21 to 30 days from the council. Let's just use that as an example. I only want 7 days to do some basic searches. Okay, so I know I'm asking a lot at the front, but you'll know in 7 days whether or not all this stuff's going to be approved. So there's all this wiggle room in an offer process that...
And vendors don't, like we said, it's not all about price for them. So the vendors I'm currently working with at the moment, there are a couple that are trying to buy another property subject to the sale of their current home. So price, although it's important, it's not the be or end all. Like they're more interested in quick finance terms, quick clauses to get unconditional faster so they can confirm the sale of the other property. So obviously people just drill down all the time and think price is the only thing that makes up a contract, but that's not necessarily the case.
Absolutely.
If you've got 2 contracts side by side and one's incredibly fast, but it's a couple of $1,000s less than the other one that could take a lot longer, then a vendor might say, well, I need this to happen quickly, so I'm prepared to take the cheaper price just to get it done.
Yeah. And look, one of the things I might move towards here is a common question we'll ask is, someone will say to my face, you have to present my offer. And it's like, that's not 100% true. So what I mean by that, someone go, will the owner take 500? It's like, no, but you didn't. You have to present my offer. It's like, well, one, we haven't put it in writing. All you've done is just thrown a price at me. You haven't given me the claims.
Do you mean like a verbal offer, like rather than it being in an
So-
offer like we've described on paper with the 2 logos, etc.?
Yeah.
If they had that with the 500, even if, say, the property was worth 800 or something, would you have to go down the path of signing all that and then delivering
Yeah,
it.
so in our code of conduct, that if you're a licensed estate agent in Tasmania, we've got a code of conduct that we must follow.
Yep.
One of the elements that it describes there is, yes, the owner will be notified of all offers that are presented in writing, and then that will be re-notified of their decision back to the purchaser. So a lot of people can get gun shy, especially they've had 5-6 offers that have been rejected. They're like, look, I just want to know whether or not my terms will be accepted. I don't want to have to write it. I don't want to have to do this. Can you please just, I'm going to offer 560 subject to finance. Can you get me an answer straight away?
Yeah.
It's like, well, so what does that mean? Well, technically I could just, call up the owner and just have that negotiation verbally until some terms of agreement. Then the contracts get drawn up. You can do it via email, and then the contracts get drawn up, which is a little bit more common, say, in Victoria, where you've got huge contracts to sit there and write every little term appropriate. So you'll have a back and forth via email or confirmed, and then it'll all be formed on the contract, whereas in Tasmania it's more common. To me, an offer in writing is one that is drawn and the terms are on the contract itself. So that's an offer in writing. And if we've got one of those, if that's in writing, then absolutely that will be presented to the client or to the vendor in this case. However, if you just throw out a number, it's like, well, we've got no obligations under our code to sit there and tell our client about it.
What if it's a super low ball? Would you just tell them not to spend their time writing it up, or say I was offering way below what the asking price was?
It all depends on what the client needs. Again, in that instance, if it's, let's just say at the advertised price, we'll just keep rolling with this 500, and then they go, I'll give them 300. It was like, I don't think that's going to be enough to buy the property. But I want you to tell the owner, well, I might have instructions from our client that says, look, we don't want to hear from you until you bring me a written offer at 500. So in that case, it's just, well,
you've discussed it with the owner already, and their parameters of don't come to me with stuff that's out.
But as far as written offers go, you should always present them regardless of price, even if it was a $300,000 offer, because
absolutely,
at the end of the day, when it comes to a written offer, we may have instructions from our owner that says, I won't accept anything less than $450, don't waste my time, and we get an offer of $300 in writing. I would still present that even though they've told me not to, mainly because I don't know if my owner's circumstances have changed in the last 2 to 3 days, a week, whatever it was since I last spoke to them, and I can't make the assumption that they will no longer look at this. Something drastically may have changed in that short period of time, and all of a sudden we need to move, we need to get this done, less than what we want. And the other reason why I would never not present it is $300,000 might be the offer, but that might not be the end price.
So then that starts negotiation back to
so
closer
as
to
an
what
agent
they might
to just
want.
say, you're an idiot, go away, I'm not presenting you $300,000 offer. That's ridiculous, because this lowball offer of $300 might end up at $475 when we're all said and done. And if an agent just tells you to go away, then how do you get that negotiation going? How do you know that that's their final price?
They could just be playing that game of I'm just going to send out a low ball, but really I'm
which
willing
doesn't
to
tend to work in this market, and a lot of people think they can still do it in this market, but it doesn't work. But it's just important to also remember that you should always present the offers regardless how silly they are. Yes, we may not be legally bound to do it with verbals versus writtens, but we should be having that conversation anyway, just so the owner is aware of what people are saying about a property.
I know this sounds ridiculous, and you're just going to have to humour me. Does it have to be a monetary offer? Could I offer them like my Super Nintendo and my car? If I was to put that in writing and then give it to you guys, would you then have to take it?
Well, fundamentally, in the offer process that you're describing there will be drastically different than the contract that's required in order for the exchange of title. So if you wanted to offer your car and your Nintendo,
Super Nintendo,
the Super Nintendo, fair enough,
valuable one,
100%.
With Mario All-Star and Yoshi's Island.
Yeah.
Oh, now, geez, he really wants his house.
Zelda.
Oh no, I'm keeping that.
Metroid. Anyway, look, you'd have to come up with a completely different form of contract. So you'd have to.
But for argument's sake.
Well, look, I think I really don't
I know, like it would most likely be.
The problem, I don't think so, because the problem is the state government needs a number affixed in order to be able to charge appropriate stamp duty. So I don't think just the sake of a car, you couldn't really, although they'd probably, I'm just thinking this through, if you could do it.
What about Bitcoin, John?
Oh, there you go. Well, there was one property that sold for Bitcoin in Queensland, I believe it was. He was accepting Bitcoin. What I really want to know is, in the event that you do trade your house for your grandmother's old boots, what
RM Williams or what type of boots we talking?
I'm thinking RMs. I'm thinking RMs.
It makes me think of that. Wasn't it the guy that started with a paperclip on eBay and he ended up getting a house?
Yeah,
at the
just
end?
trading. What I'm curious to know though is when you do exchange title for. And if someone could tell me what happened, is that the thing is the State Revenue Office needs to get paid for the stamp duty. So the thing is then is that how do they define the value in the exchange of a paperclip?
They get the shoelace from the boot.
I assume they'd get a valuation done and then you'd
pay that.
You'd pay that.
Yeah, and you'd probably be forced to pay the valuation fee as well, I'm assuming. Yeah.
Anyway, off topic a little bit. But
yeah,
hey.
exactly. But if you try to trade someone your car for the house, might not be successful until you do your research prior to, which is what we're talking about here.
Well, let's finish up, but I got one last question I want to ask, John. What is the silliest clause you've seen in a contract?
Silliest clause?
Like just something so ridiculous, you're like, why is this even in here?
Look, I don't think I've ever come across a funny one in that sense.
Do you have one, Pat?
Oh, not so much a clause, but I have a funny deposit.
Yeah,
What was that?
Super Nintendo.
I wish it was, because I would happily hold that in my trust account. I had a contract with a $10 deposit.
$10.
$10.
The purchasers didn't want to pay a deposit at all. The owner, and he's right, was saying that legally to have a contract, it needs to have a value deposit.
It does, yes.
And so he was asking for $1,000. I don't know, it was say an $80,000
Negligible.
block of land or something. He said, I want $1,000. They said no.
Yep.
And then the vendor came back and said, well, I'll take $10. So I had the purchaser come in and pay me $10.
Did he give you a
$10
$10 note?
Tenner. But the worst part was the contract fell over and then I had to get the $10 back.
And I got and bought a Happy Meal with it.
Which was just a pain.
Because the thing is, you've got to have all the checks and balances against your trust account as well. So you can't get out a tenner from your trust account. You're going to have dual signatories. You'd actually physically have to write a check for a tenner and give him that. Yeah. God, I just realised, looking at that, there is so much more to cover.
We didn't talk about anything on the list, but hey.
Yeah.
Yeah, boys, I don't feel any clearer at the end. And so if anyone out there listening...
I'm actually concerned John's more confused himself. A couple of those moments, you're looking at his face and he's just like, oh,
what did I just talk about?
I know, I think the genesis of this idea was, for this episode, was I found an old document in our Google Drive that was like making an offer.
And I don't think we followed it at all.
No, but I was thinking either I'll pop that in the show notes for anyone that's confused.
Yeah.
But maybe we read over it and
then we'll come back. Yeah.
and we'll do a sequel where we actually know what we're talking about.
I guess that's the thing, is that when my normal way of educating how to make an offer is I'll just be sitting with the person going through the terms of the contract. But that would be a very boring conversation over the property pod, I would imagine.
It's funny because...
It could be exciting.
Yeah, that's true.
40 minutes of us reading a contract out.
I've had a work experience kid working with me this week, and as I've been going through some of the processes I do, I've been trying to say, just do this, do that, and then actually verbalising all these things that are automatic in my head.
Yes.
I'm just like, I don't know how to describe. I'm like, just right-click on this and then send it here and do this and do that and do that. I'm like, it's really difficult.
Yep.
So clearly it's difficult to talk through. Like, that's just fixing up a photo, but this is writing a contract to buy a very expensive thing.
Yeah. And look, I think that's, again, I just want to stress at the end is that make sure you know what you're doing before. Sit down with someone that can walk you through the contract, because the more certain you are about all your terms and your price and getting all your homework done gives you the confidence to actually be in a better position to make a good offer on a property and negotiate well.
And I just want to put out there as well, I'm sure John's the same. I would be more than happy to talk to any first home buyer or purchaser that is confused by the process. Yeah. And if they just want an independent chat, like they don't have to buy through me. If they're picking a property with another agency and they're just concerned about the process, I'd be more than happy to have a chat on the phone or email some questions if they have. Just reach out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I did set up a email for the Property Pod last week.
Oh, cool.
So I think it's propertypodau@gmail.com.
Propertypodau@gmail.com.
So if you want to reach out to these boys, I'll pass it along to them. Obviously, they've got their work emails, patrick@414.com.au and john@mcgregorfn.com. You can reach out to those boys. There's the phone numbers that you'll have to search online because I don't want to say them because I'm not very good at numbers. But yeah, look, even if you didn't get that much out of today, you do now know that you can't trade a Super Nintendo and car for a property.
But if you've got one, I'm happy to talk further via email.
And I really want to know the process of making that happen.
I'm just curious in getting one for the collection. So if anyone's got one and they're thinking about selling it, and not that bloody remake crappy mini one that they sold a while back.
They're rubbish.
Yeah,
rubbish.
Not worth it.
All right, boys.
All right, gentlemen.
Yibbity, thanks for the rabbits.
Absolutely.
That's a bit of fun.
That's all, folks.
That's all, folks. See ya. You have been listening to The Property Pod, produced and edited by 414 Media House in conjunction with 414 Real Estate and McGregor First National Propriety Limited.
This podcast is general information only, and the thoughts and views expressed is the opinion of our panel, and listeners should always seek and use their own investigation into any topic we discuss to ensure they fully understand their own situation.
It does not constitute, should not be relied on as purchasing, selling, financial or investment advice or recommendations, express or implied, and it should not be used as an invitation to take up any agent or investment services. No investment decision or activity should be undertaken on the basis of this